we're going to start recording. We're going to start our program, and also, yeah, and people can come on as they wish. But welcome everyone. Welcome today, celebrating, honoring Human Rights Day with you all. And I just, if you want to give like a cheer or like just a clap or like whatever you feel just motivates you to be here. It's so grateful to be here with you all. My name is Marissa Gutierrez Vicario, and I'm very, very proud to be the co-chair of Human Rights Educators USA, alongside Christina Eberbach, and to be a part of this growing network. So it's also an honor to be here with you all today, especially on the significant day in celebration of international human rights. And this is the day, as many of you know, where the UN, United Nations General Assembly, adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. So this event is organized by Human Rights Educators USA. And for those of you that don't know, HRU USA was founded in 2011, and it's a growing network dedicated to building a culture of human rights educators across the United States, and working in partnership with networks everywhere else and international communities as well. So throughout this hour, I'm so excited about it. We'll hear from human rights activists and educators. We'll learn about the powerful human rights education and work that's done in communities and honoring that work. We'll experience some art, some poetry, and also view a multimedia youth project, which I'm super excited about. So again, we're honored to be celebrating this day with you all together with folks across the globe, I really do believe. And now it's my huge pleasure to hand it off to Nancy Flowers, one of the founders of HRU USA, who will introduce our keynote speaker, Loretta Ross. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marissa. It's a great pleasure, personal pleasure, to introduce Loretta Ross. We started working together back to 1998 was the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration, and we worked together on a project to try to get Americans aware of the Universal Declaration. However, it's also a challenge to introduce Loretta. How can I convey to you in a few minutes the scope of her life of leadership, scholarship, and activism? A few years ago, she wrote an article whose title captures some of that scope. It was called A Personal Journey from Women's Rights to Civil Rights to Human Rights. Loretta is an insister. She keeps on insisting that all voices and perspectives be heard and honored. As a young activist, she insisted that the perspective of Black women be included in the civil rights movement. She continues to insist that the human rights discourse is not just about lawyers and problems in faraway places, but she insists on bringing it home to the people struggling for racial, social, and economic justice in the United States. She's a brilliant organizer who understands the power of real diversity, bringing people with many issues and many histories together under the encompassing concept of human rights. She insists a group of people moving in the same direction, thinking the same thing, is a cult. A group of people moving in the same direction, thinking different things, is a movement. Loretta is a movement builder. And she has always been the consummate human rights educator. She's insisted that we have to keep on convincing people they are entitled to human rights, and then we can infuse it into the political system. She's done this in the way of all great teachers, by the powerful gift of words, by the inspiration of her wisdom and insight, and by the personal example of her own dedicated life. We could have no better speaker for our Human Rights Day celebration than Loretta Ross.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. That was a wonderful introduction, and I hope everybody is doing well and your families and your loved ones are well, because this is an extraordinarily difficult time that we're in. I have to honestly say, I didn't come to human rights naturally. At the time that I decided to dedicate my life to human rights officially was when I was working at the National Anti-Klan Network, renamed the Center for Democratic Renewal. And one of my jobs then was deprogramming people who'd been in the white supremacist movement. And you can imagine that was a challenge because if a Black woman can't hate the Klan, I mean, who's left? And so, but one of the men that I had been working with was named Floyd Cochran, and he was from the Aryan Nations. He was the former national spokesman. And once Floyd left the Aryan Nations and we started working with him, he said, Loretta, where's the movement I can now join? And I looked at him, I said, well, maybe you can join the civil rights movement. And he said, you think they're ready for an ex-Nazi? And I said, probably not. So I took his question to my boss, who was Reverend C.T. Vivian, who along with Ann Braden had founded the National Center for Human Rights the National Anti-Klan Network after 5 anti-Klan protesters were killed in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1979. And that's when CDR NACAN was founded. And so Reverend Vivian had told me a couple of things. First, when I first started working for him at CDR, he said, when you ask people to give up hate, you have to be there for them when they do. And I have to honestly say, when I heard that, that was not a message I wanted to hear, because I could not see the humanity of people in the Klan or the militia or the Aryan Nations and skinhead movements and stuff like that. So I took Floyd's question to Reverend Vivian, because he got me in this trouble, so he got to have an answer, right? And he said, Martin, and I knew right then that we've got to hear a story because he'd been the national field director for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leader. And we had to say it all in one word, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leader. But he said, Martin never meant to build a civil rights movement. He meant to build a human rights movement. And I looked at him like he'd lost his mind, because I heard all my life about he had a dream and it was about civil rights. And so Reverend Vivian went to his shelf and pulled out a copy of Dr. King's last Sunday sermon, 4 days before he died, March 31st, 1968. And Dr. King said that the world is in the midst of a triple revolution: a revolution in weaponry with our ability to destroy the earth many times over, a revolution in communications with our instantaneous ability to talk to anybody around the world. He said, but the most important revolution is the human rights revolution, a freedom explosion taking place around the world. That was March 31st, 1968. And I'm hearing this in 1994. Okay. And I felt stunned because everybody told me Dr. King had a dream. Nobody told me he had a plan. And so I again turned to Reverend Vivian. I said, well, what we're supposed to do? And he said, I don't know, but I think we need to start teaching people what their human rights are. And so here we are, Reverend C.T. Vivian, a Baptist minister, Shulamith Kernick, who was an Israeli American Jewish woman, helped me recruit Abdullahi al-Nahim, who was a Muslim scholar from the Sudan, and myself, an atheist, a Baptist, an atheist, a Muslim, and a Jew, founded the National Center for Human Rights Education, because Reverend Vivian told us Dr. King had a plan, but I figured if I was an activist and I didn't know all of this stuff, how could America not know? And so that's how we founded it. And I ran back to Floyd and said, that's the answer. You can join the human rights movement and stuff. And over the next decade, we passed out close to 1 million copies of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that was 25 years ago. I had the joy of meeting Christy Redelius Palmer and Nancy Flowers and the late Ed O'Brien, and we formed Human Rights USA to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I just think I'm honored because there were so many women of color at that time asking. I mean, Audre Lorde had talked about human rights. Tony Cade had talked about human rights. So many people had talked about human rights, but it was a memo that most of us didn't hear because it didn't really make sense until we knew the fullness of the human rights framework, because so many people just thought it was a tortured prisoner overseas somewhere, like Amnesty would always tell us to write letters about. But we didn't realize that there was a contradiction in stepping over a homeless person to go mail that letter. Because we talked about civil rights in the US and human rights overseas. And I remember one other thing I want to talk about before I shut up is I remember how Ajamu Baraka, who was then head of the Southeast region of Amnesty International, brought Pierre Sané to Atlanta, who was then Secretary General of Amnesty International. And we took the Secretary General to the parking lot of the Georgia Citizens Coalition on Hunger. And we had, through human rights education, we had taught them to use the human rights framework to campaign for raising Georgia's minimum wage, because Georgia didn't pay the federal minimum wage. Georgia exempted itself, like a lot of southern states do, from paying a minimum, the federal minimum wage. And it was in that parking lot of the Georgia Citizens Coalition on Hunger that Secretary General Sané said, Amnesty is going to work on economic, social, and cultural rights too. And I just tell that story because that's how a group of determined women of color, people coming together around human rights education, who moved the needle on a powerful organization like Amnesty International, because they stopped just working on civil and political rights, but they added economic, social, and cultural. And then when they later started talking about abortion as a human right and the rape of women, we knew we had shifted a movement. And we're going to need it so much, because I'm going to say this in closing. 26 million Americans are going hungry as we give this commemoration. 26 million Americans don't know where their food's going to come from. 3,100 people died from COVID yesterday. I could go on with the bad news, but never has it been so obvious that the interdependence of the human rights framework is what's urgently needed to save our planet and our world. But we've got to save people in order to heal the planet. We can't do it with this alienated, individualistic scarcity model that the colonizers have foisted on all of us. We've got to realize that we need each other. And I'm just proud and honored to be your Human Rights Day speaker today, because I remember that day 25 years ago when a white supremacist asked a question that started my journey in a totally different direction. And I'm honored to be here today. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Make some noise. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's all right.
Amazing. Bravo, bravo.
Marissa?
Thank you so much for that again. I think next we're going to share the awards, which I'm super excited about.
So I first would like, my name is Christy Rodilius Palmer, and I think we first want to mention that we're going to be providing for our speaker and for the awardees today and our grantees a copy of the Human Rights Game, a physical game that we are fortunate to have collaborated with Andy Chorney and Hugh Kingsley from the Brainery to provide. So this 45% of these proceeds for the Human Rights Game will come back to Human Rights Educators USA if you're interested in giving holiday gifts. But we also have worked with them to create an online version that facilitators and teachers can do and kind of exciting their students in this arena. So please take a look at what we have online. And we thank the Brainery for that partnership. And secondly, the O'Brien Award recipients will be receiving a crystal like the one I'm holding in my hand right now in the mail. Sadly, we can't present it to you in person, but we are so grateful and appreciate all the nominators for these awards. So I get to introduce the very first individual O'Brien Award recipient. While directing Human Rights Watch in Southern California, Pam Bruns conceived of the idea of the Student Task Force, now in its 21st year. She has devoted endless hours supporting students and educators to embrace human rights education as a tool for change. Her personal commitment and dedicated hours of service for the promotion and protection of human rights provides a model for youth of conscientious activism by a caring, responsible adult. Her work has influenced thousands of young lives and educators by watching a true leader who walks the talk. Pam has empowered young people to engage with city councils, state legislators, and mayors. She has also provided human rights enrichment experiences within detention centers, homeless shelters, listening to skills through first-person talks with Holocaust survivors and refugee youth. These young people have become their own human rights education ambassadors in their schools, creating innovative action projects and teach-ins on essential human rights topics, such as what Loretta mentioned, from climate change to ending gun violence to advocating for immigrants against racism and systemic change. With Pam's leadership, the Student Task Force has conducted human rights education workshops for hundreds of educators, including Angelica Pereira, who also was the nominator for Pam. With her amazing colleague, Kristen Gassarian, they have created communications tools, including newsletters and an amazing online archive of lessons. So please check it out. I feel so lucky to have firsthand experience watching Pam in action this past year as she envisioned creative ways to mentor Human Rights Watch Student Task Force teachers and advisors. Pam is a true inspiration for all of us, and it makes us want to do more and to do better. I'm honored to introduce the remarkable individual 2020 Edward O'Brien Award recipient, Pam Bruns.
Woo! Yay!
Oh my goodness.
Oh, Pam.
Thank you, Christy, for the introduction. This recognition is so much appreciated, but especially because it's a recognition of so many people who have dedicated themselves and committed themselves to the Human Rights Watch Student Task Force over 21 years. That means students and teachers, college interns, Human Rights Watch researchers, Human Rights Watch supporters, which I think illustrates the fact that it takes more than a village to raise a human rights activist. And while this recognition is really wonderful, I think probably the greatest thrill from this award is becoming familiar with Loretta Ross and meeting the people from ACT, the Center for Disability Leadership, and the Flowers Fund grantees. It's so many organizations to learn about that we think we're aware of things that are going on, but there's so much to learn about. And we need to know about our comrades in arms to give us strength as we do our work. We need to know that we're all out there. So thanks to HRE USA for bringing us together today and throughout the year. I think we're so much stronger when we can remember that we're part of an international network of human rights educators. And those educators are students and teachers and people that maybe don't have a title, but we all have an opportunity to be human rights educators. I also appreciate the opportunity to share some of our work with you today and have a wider audience know about Human Rights Watch Student Task Force, but Christy did such a thorough job. I'm not too sure how much I have to add to that. The Human Rights Watch Student Task Force we call STF. So STF is a youth leadership training program, and it gives students the opportunity to advocate for human rights. And some people might ask, well, why zero in on high school students? Why is that the focus? And I'd like to to share some comments by a Human Rights Watch colleague of mine who's actually a specialist in Middle East. And she said, high school students must learn about human rights. Human rights are the most basic building blocks of living a life of dignity. High school students need to be in a position not only to defend their own rights, but to demand the protection of others. Because ultimately, we can have a civilized society, we can have a civilized planet only if we have a rights respecting one. And that's the goal of STF, to bring together high school students and make sure that they understand what their rights are so that they can defend not only their own rights, but also protect the rights of others. And we know there's a lot of people in this group I know who work with high school students, and we know how capable and passionate high school students are. And frankly, the world needs them engaged and active now. We can't wait for them to be college graduates. The world needs them protecting human rights today. And so I'd like to take a couple of minutes to show you some examples, many of them by a photographer friend that's also on this program. So let me see if I can manage the technical here to get us there. Keywords here are education and activism. And whenever we introduce a human rights violation to the students, their first question is, what can we do? They don't worry that it's impossible. We hold workshops and educate the students about the issue we're talking about. And then we have weekly meetings in the chapters in all the high schools where they continue to do that work. Last year, for instance, we tried to deal with the issue of homeless youth in Los Angeles. And the students took that issue back to their campuses and raised the awareness of their fellow students, but they knew that they also had to come up with strategies to get the administrations of their schools to deal better with home insecure and food insecure youth. They come up with many ideas for how to reach out to their fellow students, whether it's traveling tents featuring special issues, or whether it's teaching directly to their fellow students about what human rights are and what the UDHR is. It's powerful and dynamic to watch a student educating another student about human rights. And they come up with ways of illustrating these issues that many of us would never think of. For instance, this looks like a cheerful celebration here, but those are actually loops in a chain with the names of students who've been killed by school shootings. This is a very long chain. You can only see part of it. But they have the firm belief that if they educate enough people about that abuse and gun violence, that they'll be able to solve the issue one day. They also know that voting is one of the tools that they have to address these issues. And over the past couple of years, they pre-registered and registered thousands to vote for human rights. This past year, we had a group who headed off to the city of Culver City City Council and convinced them to adopt the Convention on the Rights of the Child. They had a unanimous vote of support for that, something we haven't been able to do in the United States yet. Earlier, another delegation went to the LA City Council and gained their unanimous adoption of the CRC. Another group went to the Santa Monica City Council and also to the Santa Clarita Valley City Council, and each place received a unanimous adoption of the CRC. So we think we should send them off to the United States Senate next. The students know that climate change is going to attack all of our human rights, and so they're preparing to make that their major campaign this next spring. They've already started on it in some of the schools, and they understand that they need to educate their fellow students, but they also need to help students understand that they each can take an individual action and pledge to take that action. But they work their way up the scale, and they know that they've got to talk to the administration of their school and their school districts about changes that the school district can make, whether it's in recycling or use of plastic or converting to renewable energy sources. I think they're going to be a powerful voice this spring. Many of our members have personal knowledge of the human rights abuses on the southern border, and they use this experience to educate their fellow students about those abuses. And then they met with elected officials to try to address those terrible grievances. And the students listen to each other. Whenever we can, we bring in human rights people who've had experience, personal experience, and probably the most powerful spokesman we've had on human rights abuses have been Holocaust survivors. And this is Bill Harvey, who was from Czechoslovakia. He came to us right before the pandemic closed our schools, and he shared with the students the relationship between the human rights violations he experienced in Czechoslovakia before the Holocaust and during the Holocaust, and related them to the things that he saw going on today. And the students understand. We also try to bring Human Rights Watch researchers to meet with the students. A couple of years ago, the E-Team documentary was made about our emergency team that goes out into some of the most dangerous places in the world. And we were able to get Fred Abrahams, who's based in Berlin, to join us by Zoom. Not everything about the pandemic has been terrible. We've really learned how to use technology to reach anyone, any place in the world if they've got the time to tune in. And Fred spent about an hour with the student task force talking about his education, his experiences, asking a gazillion questions. And by the end of his time on Zoom with our student task force members, I think we had 100% student task force members ready to sign up to be researchers with Fred. So the students are ready to be educated and ready to take action. Actually, they're taking responsibility for the future now. So I would just like to say that I thank you for this recognition, but that thanks also comes from my SDF team and the students and teachers, because really it's a recognition of all of them and the work that they're doing. And I'm so very happy to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Congratulations again. Amazing work. Congratulations to Pam and your team and everyone that is a part of this work. It gives me great pleasure to also introduce the next award recipient for the Ed O'Brien Organizational Award. So many great leaders in this space right now. So I would like to share that a little bit about the organization. And the Advocating Change Together Center for Disability Leadership is a grassroots disability rights organization run by and for people with developmental and other disabilities based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. Since 1979, the ACT Center for Disability Leadership has been creating leaders in the self-advocacy movement, supporting people with disabilities to stand up for the rights and the rights of others. And I find that they do incredible work. And for me, as I was learning about them and their work, what really impressed me about the ACT Center for Disability Leadership is that they break down barriers that prevent the larger disability community from living, working, and playing side by side with everyone else, as they said in their own words. So please join me in congratulating the ACT Center for Disability Leadership and their powerful work, and let's celebrate them together today. I would like to welcome the ACT Center for Disability Leadership's Executive Director, Mary Kay Kennedy, and also she'll be introducing some of her team and accepting the Ed O'Brien Organizational Award. So thank you. Well, please welcome them.
Thanks, Marissa. I appreciate that. And as I was just unmuting myself, it reminded me Cynthia Gales is going to speak next. So Cynthia, you might want to find the little button to unmute yourself because you're going to go right after. I'm going to introduce you in a few minutes. So you want to be unmuted. So this is so great to be recognized by this wonderful community of human rights organizers. So I want to thank Chris Jacobs. She's the good ally and friend and volunteer with ACT that nominated us for this award. And I just want to recognize we have, I think probably half of our board at least is here today just in celebration of this really fun accomplishment for us. So, you know, I just was kind of just thinking about what to say. And, you know, when you think about the lives of folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, really most of our systems around disability are very firmly planted in a medical viewpoint of disability. So for many of our members, the real oppression has been around people trying to change them to fit society. So behavior modification, therapies, lose weight, you know, change to be what society kind of considers the norm. So at the ACT Center, what we have the privilege of doing over, in terms of developing relationships with folks and just helping people think about, well, maybe you're perfectly perfect exactly how you are. And maybe it's society that needs to change to honor and respect and include and honor the contributions of all of everyone. So we're, all about getting out there and being side by side with everyone else in the community. And we see firsthand all the time that when people have supports for disability inclusion, it really works out great. And we see really fabulous results. When people do not receive those supports, for the most part, folks with developmental disabilities are still segregated and isolated. So ACT has been doing the work for over 40 years. We're really proud of the work that we're doing in Minnesota. But the other thing we're super proud of is being connected with this wonderful human rights educator community. So we've known Christy Redelius Palmer for decades. And we about 10 years ago, we met Nancy Flowers and Janet Lord. And this group has really helped us connect with a broader rights community and introduced us to opportunities to connect nationally and even connect internationally. So we've been able to connect pretty significantly on some international disability rights efforts. So that's been, for our organization, it's been super cool. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Cynthia Gales. And Cynthia is the Vice President of Advocating Change Together. And she has participated and graduated from a year-long leadership program in Minnesota that's sponsored by our organization. And she really has stepped big time into a leadership role where she is helping Minnesota really figure out, how do we provide the supports people need to be included in community. So her work is really important, and she's a very strong leader. Cynthia is also a human rights educator. She has led or facilitated dozens and dozens of sessions with folks with disabilities to help people think about personal empowerment and what they want and who they are, and helping them connect to broader civil and human rights struggles. And again, helping people just get out there and enjoy life side by side with everyone else. So I'm going to introduce now Cynthia Gales, one of Minnesota's finest. All right, Cynthia.
How everybody doing? All right.
Good.
All right. On behalf of Advocating Change Together, I am so happy to accept this award. I am the Vice President of ACT, and this award means a lot to us. At ACT, we have a lot of different human rights training. And at this one training, I wrote a song. I just want to say a few lines of the song. We deserve our human rights, not just me, but you too. Living in the community, not just me, but you too. We have freedom and dignity, not just me, but you too. You know, that song means a lot to me. I'm just trying to get it out there to let everyone know that just because you have you're disabled or you have some kind of disability, you should have that same human rights, that same dignity, and that same freedom as everyone else, and not just that. I'm going along with the housing, rights, the side-by-side love in the community. Just love, period. And I just want y'all to remember, it's about all of us, not just me, but you too. Not just me, but you too. I can't hear you. Can y'all please say that with me? Not
just me,
but you
too.
too.
Not just me, but you
But you
But
too.
you too.
Just me,
Thanks,
but you too.
everybody. It's a great honor. Thank you. Hey. Okay.
Mary Kay, do you have some closing remarks or are you done?
No, we're going to move to the video now. So they have a wonderful closing video about ACT. So, Jake, can you run that, please? Thanks.
Hi, this is Mary Kay Kennedy with Advocating Change Together Center for Disability Leadership. Part of ACT's role in the disability community is coordinating a network of groups across the state called Self Advocates Minnesota, or SAM.
We're working with persons with intellectual developmental disabilities, self-advocates, and this is giving an opportunity for self-advocates to learn how to do some peer-to-peer training in all of these homestead areas, transportation, housing, employment, and education. So yeah, it's going to be great. They're finding out what their rights are, and they're going to be presenting their perspective on that to other self-advocates.
Tell me a little bit about the Olmsted Academy and what you liked about it.
For me, the spirit of the whole experience, all of the people that were involved, the trainers that were leading the activities were just full of energy and did a great job of including everybody in the activities.
We are so proud to have these wonderful winners. I want to say in conclusion something about the Ed O'Brien Awards. They were established in 2017 in honor of Edward O'Brien. He was an individual who made a great difference in many of our lives and a pioneer in human rights education. Each year, Human Rights Educators USA gives 2 awards, one to an organization and one to an individual who's made a significant contribution to human rights education in the United States. I think this is the only such award. I might also mention that the 2 presenters today, Christy Redelius Palmer and Marissa Gutierrez, were also themselves recipients of the Ed O'Brien Awards. And we're so happy to remember Ed on this particular day, but we miss him almost every day. Thank you.
So thank you, and I believe we're going to pass it over to Alana. So.
Thank you so much, Mary Kay and Pam, for bringing your outstanding work to our communities. So my name is Ilana Haviv. I am the founder and executive director of Generation Human Rights, and I also have the privilege of serving on the HRE USA Executive Committee. And I'm very excited that I will be introducing you to Uma Menon. So Uma is currently a freshman at Princeton University, and I've known her since she was a high school intern at Generation Human Rights, where she co-founded GenHR Changemaker, an initiative created by high schoolers that highlights the work of teens around the world who promote positive change in their communities. Uma is a writer and has published several books and has been a youth fellow for the International Human Rights Art Festival, a 2020 US Senate Youth Program delegate, and is a 2020-21 Encore Public Voices Fellow. I can't keep up with her. So I am going to pass the mic on to Uma, who is going to share some of her human rights poetry. Thank you, Uma.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction, Alana. I'm so grateful and honored to be with you all today, and I'm so excited to celebrate Human Rights Day. I think that poetry, creative writing, and the arts in general are such important tools in our mission to achieve global justice and human rights. Poetry can raise awareness of issues, cultivate empathy, and inspire action. And that's what I hope to do with these two poems that I'm going to share with you all today. The first poem is titled They Ask for Hope, an ode to Rohingya refugee girls. In a photograph, I see girls strung together like beads, their eyes cast down like the sun's tired rays. They stand below hollow roofs and bamboo walls, imprisoned by the grasp of violence. A child loses her mother to a burning village. Another watches her mother stripped by knives. They run with the wind between their fingers and the sun above their cheeks to escape the grip of angry men. Now, they string their arms around each other's necks, casting hope through their small smiles. They ask for little, a book, a pencil, or a weapon of knowledge. They spend their days quietly wrapped in tents, laughing only when the world holds on tightly. Girls across the world bound by steel, not thread. We are here for them all. We must be. So this poem is dedicated to raising awareness of the Rohingya refugee crisis, which is the largest refugee crisis in the world and one of the most urgent humanitarian crises currently occurring. A lot of times we forget about the tangible real-world impacts that these human rights crises can have on everyday people, especially marginalized communities. And this poem explores the complexity of this by raising awareness of the unique struggles faced by girls as well as children who don't have access to education during this refugee crisis. The second poem I'm going to share with you all is titled Giving a Mongoose a Plastic Bottle. In my motherland, I see a mongoose sinking its warrior teeth into plastic trash. The sunlight reflects its struggle, plastic across oceans, across rice fields, across a cardboard building where a forest once breathed. This land has given me a life, and I've given it bottle caps. Warning, choking hazard, mongoose can't read, immune to snake venom, susceptible to plastic bottles. The lake has closed its eyes and swallowed brown water sprinkled with plastic bags. Warning, to avoid danger of suffocation, keep this plastic bag away from babies and children and lakes and oceans and mongoose and hornbills and turtles and peacocks and rice fields and forests and deserts and. This poem is about environmental justice and the importance of protecting our environment from pollution, waste, climate change, and all of those other harms to the environment. So often, we as a society fail to recognize the human rights implications of environmental injustice. Environmental injustice interferes with our right to breathe unpolluted air, our access to clean water, and especially the rights of Indigenous communities and marginalized communities. So this poem lends a voice to the earth, to our planet, and humanizes the struggle for environmental justice. Thank you all so much for your time. It was such a pleasure to share these poems, and happy Human Rights Day.
Thank you, Uma. Those were beautiful. Thank you for sharing. My name is Christina Eberbach, and I'm the Deputy Director at the Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia and also the co-chair of HRUSA. It's my honor to introduce recipients of one of our other awards. In November of 2017, HRUSA established the Flowers Fund in honor of one of its founding members, Nancy Flowers. Every year, the Flowers Fund provides small grants to support innovation and mentorship in human rights education in the United States. The fund aims to encourage new philosophic and theoretical thinking, new pedagogies, and new outreach methods for human rights education, as well as emerging leadership in the field. Our three recipients this year are John Terry, the Connecticut Council for Youth Advocacy and Action, represented by Jake Skripik and Chris Buckley, and Physicians for Human Rights Georgetown Chapter, represented by Peter Rakita. So I would like to invite each of our winners to briefly introduce their projects. And John, I'll invite you to speak first, please.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Christina. I'm so humbled to be included in this program today with such inspirational voices. in the field of human rights and human rights education. I'm a social studies teacher in Wayne Township, New Jersey, where I teach US history and an elective course in human rights. And I'm honored and grateful to be a recipient of the funding from HRE USA and the Flowers Fund to support our work for providing professional development and human rights education in the state of New Jersey, where we now have new curriculum standards that require human rights to be taught in our classrooms with more substance. And I'm grateful for the support and contributions of the team of talented educators I have been working with on this project in the state of New Jersey. Members of the HRE USA New Jersey State Working Group have collaborated to put together a series of online videos in which we showcase model lesson plans we wrote and piloted, and which are published in the HRE USA Curriculum Integration Guide. And if I have your permission, I'd love to share that with you all real quick. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but for those who are new to this resource, if you go to hreusa.org, you'll see these materials under publications, and we have a whole bunch of great model lesson plans available for educators there. The educators that were contributing to this project include Samira Marcos of Hunterdon Central High School, Malcolm Coates of Ridge High School, Jamie Warner of Orange Avenue School in Cranford, New Jersey, and Sharon Sweeney of Hunterdon Central High School. The videos explain human rights education, and how human rights and human rights concepts can be used to inform teaching in social studies classrooms. Some of the lessons focus on a project-based learning methodology and address topics such as human rights and contemporary issues, national memory and human rights, and a case study approach to the post-apartheid Constitution of South Africa. These videos are currently featured at the New Jersey Council for Social Studies annual conference, which has been hosted online and asynchronously this year, and offers professional development credit to attendees. So far, our top selling video is Samira Marcos's lesson on human rights and national memory, which as of November 28th has over 70 conference goers checking out that resource in particular. So thanks again for the support of HRE USA and the Flowers Fund for making this work possible. And I'm excited to be providing this content to educators in New Jersey and to help them embark on their journey of educating about, through, and for human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and congratulations again. Jake, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, John, as well. So everyone, my name is Jake Skripek. I am a social studies teacher in Connecticut, along with my colleague, Chris Buckley, who is also on the call. We have really been engaged in a lot of adult work over the last couple of years around furthering human rights education in the state of Connecticut. But we've also turned our efforts to really centering youth through human rights education. We've done a number of activities with a couple of partner organizations that we work with, but we have come up with a new organization called the Connecticut Human Rights Youth Council that we have really tried to formalize as a youth-centered space to drive human rights education across schools and across our communities. We are just launching this project. We have a number of students who've actually been facilitating and moderating webinars that we've been doing. So we had a number of students on a Human Rights Day celebration we did yesterday. And most especially with the help of the Flowers Fund, we are really trying to build the leadership and the skill capacity of those students. So this previous weekend, we sent 2 students who are also on this call, Ali and Zoe, to the National Council for the Social Studies virtual conference to really develop their content knowledge and their leadership expertise. We're hoping to use part of the grant to further those leadership activities. And I can just speak for Chris and myself that we're very thankful for HRE USA giving us this support. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the program today.
Thank you, and congrats to you as well. Peter.
So thank you so much, Christina. It's also an honor for me to be here with you all today and to hear what you all have to say and just being in the presence of so many inspiring people. It's incredible. But my name is Peter Rikita. I'm a second-year medical student at Georgetown University School of Medicine. And I'm part of our student organization, Physicians for Human Rights. And so the main operation of our organization is to connect asylum seekers in the DMV area with physicians and healthcare professionals that can perform medical evaluations and then submit an affidavit that helps with their legal team and that helps them bolster their case for asylum when they're applying for that status in the United States. So with this grant, we'll be able to hold educational trainings for medical students, for healthcare professionals, workers, for physicians to get involved, to get registered, and then they can take on more of these cases. There's a huge need for this, for more physicians, for more healthcare workers to be involved in the DMV area. There's so many people seeking asylum, and the help that a medical evaluation gives is astronomical. The chances of your asylum case being accepted goes up from in the range of 30% to over 90% if you have one of these medical evaluations. So we're hoping that in the next year, we'll be able to educate over 100 physicians and students. And on top of this, we hope that we'll be able to hold events on various advocacy and educational topics in the area of human rights. So thank you all again so much.
Great, thank you, and congratulations again to our 3 winners. I would also like to announce a new fellowship in honor of our very dear colleague, Kirby Edmonds, who passed away this summer. Drawing on his years of community organizing, Kirby was instrumental in the establishment of HRUSA, directly shaping our mission statement, organizational structure, and most importantly, our values framework and the consensus-based policy for decision-making. He served as co-chair of HRUSA for nearly a decade. He was also the program coordinator and a senior fellow with the Dorothy Cotton Institute and the Cradle to Career Initiative. Yet the scope of his work reached well beyond these roles. In honor of his legacy, HRUSA is pleased to announce the new Kirby Edmonds Fellowship, which will support students with hands-on leadership experience in human rights education and further Kirby's work to engage young people in building human rights-friendly schools and communities. Our applications will be announced in February 2020, and we'll be sending out more information via our newsletter. And for those who want to learn more about Kirby and his work or contribute to the fellowship, we've also included a link to the fellowships page in the chat. Thank you and congratulations again to everyone. And Alana, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Christina. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk for a moment about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, acronym UDHR. As you know, it is a milestone document in the history of human rights, and it was drafted by representatives from all regions of the world. And the declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10th, 1948. The world has faced many challenges and continues to face them since 1948, yet we still choose and work to uphold the articles of the UDHR. Most of us at this event today have read the UDHR and possibly even heard people verbally speak the articles of the UDHR, most likely in your native language. However, the UDHR has actually been translated in over 500 languages. In fact, the UDHR received a certificate from the Guinness Book of World Records as the most translated document in the world. So if you remember one thing today from what I say, that's a good one to have as trivia. So today, we want everyone to share a different experience of the UDHR, a very unique one that brings youth together from around the world, sharing the UDHR articles in their native languages, and also includes self-advocates from the ACT Center for Leadership, who will share Article 26. So I want to just very quickly take a moment to thank the many people who joined together to create this video. We've spanned over 6 countries at least, and a special thanks to our youth activists and self-advocates for sharing their voices. Before we hit play, I'm going to put the video link in the chat box. So in case things get choppy on Zoom, you can access it on your own. Thank you. And I'm going to hand things over to Jake.
On December 10, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted and proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. This declaration guarantees the rights of all people. December 10th is recognized as Human Rights Day worldwide.
The General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, and shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms.
Todos los seres humanos nacen iguales en dignidad y derechos.
다행이죠.いかなる種類の差別からの自由。
任何人不得使为奴隶或奴役，一切形式的奴隶制度和奴隶买卖均应予以禁止。
المادة الخامسة لا يجوز إخضاع أحد للتعذيب والمعاملة الحاطة بالكرامة.
Todo ser humano tiene derecho en todas partes al reconocimiento de su personalidad jurídica.
모든 사람은 법 앞에 평등하며 어떠한 차별도 없이 법의 동등한 보호를 받을 권리를 가진다. 모든 사람은 이 선언에 위반되는 어떠한 차별과 그러한 차별의 선동으로부터 동등한 보호를 받을 권리를 가진다.
Artículo 8. Toda persona tiene derecho a un recurso efectivo ante los tribunales nacionales competentes que la ampare contra actos que violen sus derechos fundamentales reconocidos por la Constitución o por la ley.
Ningú pot ser arrestat, detingut ni exiliat arbitràriament.
Article 10. Everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing by an independent tribunal.
Artículo 11. Toda persona acusada de delito tiene derecho a que se presuma su inocencia mientras no se pruebe su culpabilidad, conforme a la ley y en el juicio público en el que se le hayan asegurado todas las garantías necesarias para su defensa.
Article 12. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence.
Article 13. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state.
Ogni individuo ha il diritto di cercare e di godere in altri paesi asilo dalle persecuzioni.
Article 15. Everyone has the right to a nationality. No one should be deprived nor denied the right to change his nationality.
Article 16. Men and women of full age, without any limitation, have the right to marry and to have a family.
Her şahıs tek başına veya başkalarıyla birlikte mal ve mülk sahibi olmak hakkına haizdir.
Każdy człowiek ma prawo wolności myśli, sumienia i wyznania. Prawo to obejmuje swobodę zmiany wyznania lub wiary oraz swobodę głoszenia swego wyznania lub wiary bądź indywidualnie i razem z innymi ludźmi, publicznie i prywatnie, poprzez nauczanie, praktykowanie, uprawianie kultu i postrzeganie obyczajów.
Artículo 19. Todos tienen el derecho a la libertad de expresión y opinión sin intromisión.
제20조. 모든 사람은 평화적인 집회 및 결사의 자유에 대한 권리를 가진다.
Toute personne a droit à la liberté de réunion et d'association. Nul ne peut être obligé de faire partie d'une association.
Article 21. Everyone has the right to take part in freely elected government. Everyone should get a vote and all votes should be equal.
Article 22. Everyone has the right to Social Security, indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his personality.
Article 23. You have the right to work and to get a salary that allows you to live and support your family.
Article 24. Everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay.
Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the well-being of himself and his family.
Artículo 26. Todos tienen el derecho a la educación. La educación se orientará al pleno desarrollo de la identidad humana y a la consolidación del respeto de los derechos humanos.
Education will help me build my own personality.
We belong in the same classroom as everybody else, not segregated from everyone.
If we need help, we get help.
Just because we have a disability doesn't mean we can't reach our full potential.
Artículo 27. Toda persona tiene el derecho a tomar parte libremente en la vida cultural de la comunidad.
Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized.
Article 29. Everyone has duties towards a community within which his personality can fully develop. The law should guarantee human rights.
Article 30. No society and no human being in any part of the world should act in such a way as to destroy the rights that we have just shared.
Wow, congratulations. That was just fantastic. Thank you so much for everyone who put their time and efforts to making it possible. There were a lot of hands in that kitchen, so thank you very much. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Loretta Ross for her inspirational words. The wonderful Pam Bruns and ACT Center for Disability Rights, who showed us what really putting human rights education into action really means. The Flowers Fund recipients, John, Peter, Jake, Chris, for your innovative projects, working with young people and creative new initiatives coming out of your work. And we're looking forward to welcoming our first Kirby Edmonds 2021 Student Fellowship this summer. A sincere appreciation also to the Puffin Foundation, who has provided ongoing financial support to Human Rights Educators USA, and our many individuals and organizational supporters for the Flowers Fund, Edmonds Fellowship, and our general fund. Lastly, but not least, a big shout out to all of our members, our committee leaders, the 30 tireless regional representatives for HRE USA that really provide the fuel for creating this human rights education movement together. Marissa?
Yes, and we also want to thank the Center for Transformative Action for their essential fiscal agency support. And last but certainly not least, deep appreciation, deep gratitude for Nancy Flowers for orchestrating our first digital human rights celebration, along with an amazing support team of Emily, Alana, Christy, Christina, Jake, and others. So thank you for this. And if you feel so moved by this work that was shared today, please consider donating to HRE USA, and we'll include a link in the chat box below. So we'll have that there. But lastly, in this movement, we want to recognize that human rights education is not celebrated just on one day, but every day. So we invite you to stay involved with HRE USA and continue to engage with our communities. Stay active, stay hopeful, and it's because of people like you. Also, we want to thank you for being here, and it's because of people like you that we are moving towards a more peaceful and equitable world. So thank you for joining us again, and please take care of yourselves.
Oh. Happy Human Rights Day. Woo!
Happy Human Rights Day.
We can unmute and cheer.
Woo! Thank you.
Right.
Oh, wow. Give it up.
Good work.
Thank you, everybody, and let's have a great year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a great program. You guys really pulled together a wonderful program.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fabulous. Wonderful, wonderful new blood coming in to the world, human rights world.
Work, really. Great work. And technologically astute too, which helps those of us who are still techno peasants.
Thanks, Jake and Christina on the tech front.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Human Rights Day.
Happy
Thank
Human
you.
Rights Day.
Human Rights Day. Hasta la vista.
Oh.